Hello, once again, welcome to Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks, the Ranunculus Help Edition. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. I'm coming to you on my day off. I'm dressed down, all that good stuff. I thought I would back up a little. What I didn't show you as I'm kind of churning through the ranunculus that I'm making out of worsted weight, which shows up nicer on camera, is the short sleeve edition, which is just binding off your stitches. There's a lot of it that is very similar to the long sleeve, except for you're not putting it on holders, you're binding off your sleeves. The reason I didn't show it in a video is I already did that on one that I have in the shop. And so the two that I'm making right now for our April knit along with Sun Dragon Art and Fiber, I am doing the long sleeves, which could be little cap sleeves, could be longer than that. I think both the ones I'm making are going to have longer sleeves. So I wasn't going to do that on either of mine, so I hadn't made a video. But y'all are finding the video so helpful that this is obviously not a ranunculus. I've made a little swatch that just has a few rows of knitting on it and some stitch markers in place, so I can at least demonstrate what the short sleeve instructions are telling you to do. Now remember, this is not to replace the pattern. Midori Hirose's pattern is wonderful and you should go buy it on Ravelry and then use these to help you understand what is going on in the pattern. I also have a playlist here on my Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks channel that has a lot of basics of sweaters, things like that. I have a ranunculus playlist. I have a sweater playlist that can help you just understand patterns in general. So I'm going to show you some of the things that she is mapping out here. I'm going to show you what that looks like rather than just reading it. And then you can do it yourself. Remember, this doesn't look like a ranunculus because it's not, but I'm going to show you what that bind off looks like. It's actually wonderful if you want to do the simplest form of this sweater. So let's get to it. So some of what's happening here is very similar to what happened in the long sleeve version, and some of it is simpler, and some of it may be a little more challenging. It's all okay if you take it one step at a time. I came home without my really big stitch markers for my really big yarn, which is my sample yarn in a lot of my other videos. So I have made my own version of stitch markers. This one's my beginning of round, and they're all the same color, but I know what they are. So the short sleeve version says there's 2 1/4 rounds that you need to do. So there's more rounds in this version than there is for long sleeves. And she does mention even if you want a little bit of ribbing on your sleeves, then you should do the long sleeve version. This is if you just want to be done with the sleeves as soon as you hit sleeve separation. So round 1, we're knitting to the marker, the first sleeve marker, which I have not very many stitches away here. I made this sample kind of short on purpose. Here is my first sleeve marker, my first marker that I'm coming across after my end of round. We're going to take it off. She says to bind off to marker with elastic bind off. And she has instructions. Here's what that looks like. This is a knit 2 together through the back loop, but it's a little stretchier than the other video I have on knitting 2 together through the back loop. We're going to ignore all of these guys. We're going to do the slip 1, knit 1, insert the left hand needle into the front of the 2 stitches on your right hand needle. So right in here, right in front, from left to right, and knit the 2 stitches together through their back loops. So this is like the way that this needle on the right is situated. We haven't come through and twisted. It's not twisted, so it's like knitting through the back loop. Let's see with my big chunky yarn if I can keep that. There you go. I call it the duck and tuck when you knit through the back loop. It might feel a little different than knitting frontwise. My knit 2 together through the back loop. Some videos for those, you just go right into the next one and knit these 2 together. She wants you to knit 1 more and then put your left needle into the front of those 2 stitches, the last 2 stitches that's on your right needle, and knit them together through the back loop. And again, I'm going to have to hang on to all of this because the chunky yarn is like, what are you doing? It's going to be easier to tell what you're doing because you're getting further away from the stuff back here. So again, knit one. Get your left needle in front of those 2 stitches that are on the tip of your right needle and knit them together. For people who hold their yarn continental, this is going to be a hot mess for me because it's not my strength. But if we knit one more and put our needle through and then catch this yarn again and pull it through. It's the same motions, the yarn is just held a little differently. You keep repeating, knit one more, put your left hand needle in the front of those 2 on your right, and get it under. I'm a little faster when I hold the yarn over on my right hand, even though I'm left-handed. But see, it gives you a stretchy cast off here. She wants you to bind off to the marker. Here's my next marker. For me, it's only 10 stitches. That is not the number in the pattern. You should be following the instructions in the pattern. Whoop. And take your time if you're having as much trouble as I am with this big chunky yarn. Luckily, the Ranunculus is not written for big chunky yarn. You can always stretch it a little to get your duck and tuck through. I am coming up on the marker. Knit one. Put your left needle into the front of these stitches. So you can give it a little tug if you want to make it wide enough to easily knit it through the back loop. I'm at the marker. Okay. We're going to take this one off too. And then she wants you to bind off one more stitch because this guy was part of your sleeve stitches. So we need to do one more bind off after we take the marker. So we'll knit one more stitch. Put our left needle back in the front. Make sure you're not catching too much. Here we go. Repeat between the asterisks. Knit over to your next marker. So I'm knitting across the front. I'll meet you over there. Okay, we're repeating what we did before. Take the marker off. We're going to use the elastic bind off, which is slipping the first stitch. We could probably slip it knitwise and it would be okay. Doesn't really matter. That only happens at the very beginning. I'm going to knit one, put my left needle back in the front of the end 2 stitches on my right, wrap around and duck that wrap around under. Then repeat, knit one more. Left needle goes in the front. Repeat over and over. Knit one more. Left needle in the front of the 2 stitches. Knit them together, ostensibly through the back loop. Do that all the way over to your next marker. Your yarn may have more give than mine on this sample. And hopefully I left myself enough yarn to do the next round. I'm almost there. I am at my marker. Take it off. Do one more stitch to make sure your stitch count matches the long sleeve. And then she says knit to the marker. That's our first round. Our first round has created little sleeves here. The sleeves have been created but there's still a really big gap here. When you do the long sleeve, you take these stitches off onto a holder and you already have crossed this boundary. It takes another row to do this for the short sleeves. So we want to knit over to the hole over here to our first sleeve. And then we've got a funky instruction that I'm going to see how clearly I can show you on this big bulky yarn. She's got a really great picture there. Okay, I am all the way over. I told you I made this short, this little sample short for a reason. I'm all the way over to this where I bound off. She wants you to insert the needle into your first bound off stitch and pick up a stitch. Now it can be like, where on earth are we doing things? What I would say is it's the first V you can see. I know on her thing it's hunkered down a little. It might be on mine too. Like we've got these ones way up top and we have this guy. It's as close as a V I can find to where I am. Like there's a strand here, but it's not a strand that wraps around another stitch. It's this guy right here. Put my needle under it. She's got it drawn and labeled in red. She wants you to insert your needle right in here. It should be under 2 strands of a V that wraps under this. I have the next V here. This V with 2 strands wraps underneath there. This is where she wants you to pick up. So if we insert the needle here to pick up a stitch, there's ways you can do it by you can just stick in your right needle right in that spot right there, right? If you want to do it with not with 2 needles, you can stick your right needle in, yarn around however you can, and duck it back under. Like I showed you in the other video for starting the rest of your sleeve, I like to pick it up with my left needle and then knit it with my right. So I pick it up, I get my left needle in there, and then I get my right needle in there. It might really need to stretch, but then it feels like a knit stitch. So I can wrap around and duck under and just take this needle out. Now she says turn your work to use the cable cast on method. So switch hands of what the needles are in. That means your yarn is now over on the left side and the gap is over on the right. And we want to move the yarn to the back to do this. And I explained this in the long sleeve video, but if you're doing short sleeves, you might not watch that video. So a cable cast on, a knitted cast on, you would go into your stitch like you're going to knit it, the last stitch on your left needle. Cable cast on, we're going to go between, let me get my hand out of the light there. We're going to go in between this stitch and this one, right in between like that. See the difference? If I went to knit, it would look like this. If I go to do a cable cast on, it looks like this. So I stick my right needle in, wrap around, pull up, and then you can put it straight on or you can twist it. But do the number that she says. For my little sample, I'm only going to do 2 or let's say 3. So I've got one here. I'm going to go between the one I just added on and the next one. I'm going to push straight through between the 2 stitches. Wrap around, duck that back under and stick it on. That's 2. My number that I've picked for this demonstration is 3. So I'm going to put it between the last 2 stitches again, wrap around and pull up and stick on. That's my number. You do the number that she says to put on. Place a marker for your new beginning of round. Try to ignore him. And then she wants you to cast on a certain other number. It's probably going to be about 1 more. So I'll do 4. Again, I'm going to ignore my little homemade stitch marker and I'm going to go between the last 2 stitches. Maybe move this to the front for a second. Wrap around and pull up. Move that guy back there. If you have danglies, you're going to have to move dangly stitch markers. You're going to have to move them out of the way. 1. And if you yank too hard and tight on this, because you're like, I don't want it to fall off, it may become hard to do your next one. Keep them kind of loose. It's better for them to be a little loose than too tight. Here's 2. Again, I'm trying to ignore my stitch marker. Here's 3. And here's 4. Now the reason why she has you do one more on the other side of this stitch marker is about to come up. She wants you to turn it back around again. We're going to close this gap. So she wants you to take the last stitch from your left, like the one closest to the edge of your left hand needle, which is not where your yarn is anymore because we've turned back around again. Slip that over to your right hand needle and pass the last cast on stitch over the edge. There's your slip stitch. Here's your last cast on, and then cinch that up. Give it a tug now. That's the one time, yes, you can tug. Now, guess what? You have balanced numbers on either side of that stitch marker. Now we're going to repeat the instructions from the asterisk on this round, but we don't need to place a marker. This is our new end of round marker. So we're not going to place that guy, but just like I did for the long sleeves, let's go over to the other gap over here. Again, we're trying to close the hole here, so she wants you to pick up, find the first top V, not front V, first top V, to pick up a stitch. Turn your work, get your yarn in back to cast down however many she says to cast on. My numbers on the other side weren't commensurate with what she is going to tell you to do. So follow her instructions. Don't worry about my explanations. I'm probably going to cut them out because she has a reason for all of this. So again, cable cast on. I'm going to do the same number I did on the other side, which was 3 and 4, which is not equal to any of hers. So here's my second. Stick between the end 2 stitches. That last one we added, try not to make him too tight. Here's my 3. Where the first time it said to add a marker, don't add a marker because we only need to do that once, but now I'm going to do my 4 more. So I have to start my count over. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I'm going to turn my work back around. Let me just flip hands and then get my yarn straightened out. I like him underneath. So I want to keep this flat. I don't want it twisting around my needle. Now her last, and see, I just almost did that by pulling up. That's the edge twisting. I want to have that lying flat underneath. Now to close the gap up, I'm going to slip this stitch over from left to right, take my last cast on, pull it over that slip stitch and off and tug it up so that now I have an armhole over here. And I'm going to knit to my old end of round marker. I get to take him off. And I'm going to knit over to my new end of round marker, which is in the bottom of the armhole, and continue on to section 6. Slide it over. I'll do one more stitch so he doesn't fall off, but I am ready. Again, doesn't look like a ranunculus, but what I can show you, I'm ready for section 6. I've got an armhole and an armhole, and this is my torso now under here. Now, just a word of caution. See how this top part up here is rolling? The nice part about her short sleeve instructions is you're done with the sleeves now. You don't ever have to come back to them. but you can't really see it on this because I made it so small. I made my little sleeve sample here so small, but it'll do the same thing that the top of this did. Your sleeve will just roll. If you like a nice little rolled edge on your sleeve, this is perfect. If you don't want a rolled edge on your sleeve, then you should follow the instructions for the long sleeve. Doesn't mean you have to make long sleeves, but it will give you stitches on a stitch holder here, so you can go back and put a little edging on that won't roll. So thanks for joining me on a non-traditional day with a non-traditional video for the ranunculus, since it's a section that I'm not doing on my current ranunculus. I have this chunky sample for what the bound off sleeves will look like. I'll put a picture at the end of what the ranunculus in the shop looks like on its little hanger with its little rolled sleeves. If you have appreciated these videos, please consider subscribing, liking this video, leaving a comment or a question. I answer those when I'm able to. And those are all free of charge to do. If you'd like to support all the time and energy that goes into these videos, I love helping people out, but it is helpful if you would like to help me out too. There are memberships on this channel, and there are subscriptions over on patreon.com/sundragon. It's a way to help support the work we do here, but it is not required by any means. We also have the Sundragon KAL page over on Facebook. This is the current knit along. As we go through in another month or so, we will shift to a new knit along, but you're welcome to post questions and photographs, and hopefully the community there can keep helping as we all keep knitting. I am fully aware that there isn't necessarily a time frame in which patterns get done. So we might shift to a new knit along in June. That doesn't mean that your ranunculus has to be done by then. There are some people who are on their second or third ranunculus, and for some of them, they may have started before we did ours. And there are some people that it may take months to finish their ranunculus. You go at your own speed, and that is okay. As I always like to sign off, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Bye-bye now.